while at the same time recording sonar tracings. Tracings which indicate the passing of two large marine animals. On the sonar tracings, even the oft-reported mysterious humps of the creature registered. The photographs are close-up dramatic pictures of a fin, about 8 feet long and 4 feet wide. The fin of the Loch Ness Monster. An eyewitnesses' descriptions and the various photographs suggests that the Loch Ness Monsters are a family of plesiosaurs, animals believed extinct for millions of years. As we learned with the coelacanth, extinct is not as final as it sounds. Some scientists now believe Loch Ness is home to 30 or 40 such giant creatures. Creatures the local people refer to as Nessie, a harmless monster.
Then there was the incident in 1977 when a Japanese trawler picked up what appeared to be a sea monster. It was partially decomposed and smelled bad, so they threw it back overboard, but not until they took some pictures. Only later, when scientists seen the pictures, they couldn't believe their eyes. It appeared to be a plesiosaurus, which was thought to be extinct millions of years ago.
Amateur scientist believes he could have captured the Loch Ness Monster on videotape. Yorkshireman Gordon Holmes was carrying out experiments at the famous Loch when, by chance, he happened to spot a strange creature in the waters. Now, film of the incident is causing a sensation. Well, we can now join our own Nessie hunter by the shores of the Loch, Nicola McCally. Nicola, it seems Nessie's back in time for summer.
Well, Kirsten, the legend of the Loch Ness Monster dates right back to 565 AD when St Columba was said to have seen a strange monster in the waters behind me here. Now, since then, tales of Nessie have surfaced regularly and she's become something of an icon right around the globe. So whenever there are tales of new sightings, it sparks something of a frenzy, and it's certain that these new pictures will already be causing a stir. And as you can see for yourselves, there's definitely something in the water. Could this be the Loch Ness Monster? This footage was taken at the weekend by an amateur scientist who happened to spot a fast-moving creature swimming across the world-famous Loch. Gordon Holmes from Yorkshire had been undertaking some amateur scientific tests on the Loch, recording sounds from the deep with special hydrophonic equipment. But nothing prepared him for the prospect of actually setting eyes on what could be the elusive Nessie, an event he luckily captured on film.
I suspect that if they can't quite figure out quickly what it is, it'll take years of continual argument, and who knows, if it turns out to be an unknown creature, unknown species, that's going to flood the local tourism in the area.
Gordon took his tape to local experts who say it warrants further scrutiny, and so far the jury's out.
It has the appearance of an animal of some sort in Loch Ness. The issue, of course, is how big is it and what is it? And I'm afraid that is going to have to await some further assessment. There are, of course, a number of creatures in Loch Ness that can give rise to wakes, and they would include otters, seals and water birds.
Gordon hopes to have the tape further analysed to try to get to the bottom of the Nessie mystery. But even from a scientific viewpoint, he believes the Loch Ness legend stands up to scrutiny.
Of all the things that are sort of unknown, I think the Loch Ness Monster is the one that's got the most credibility due to reliable witnesses in the past, and also due to these sonar contacts. I mean, you just can't throw those kind of ideas away and ignore them. I think you need science to look deeper into it.
The search for Bigfoot in the United States is in its infancy. The search for a relative of the Bigfoot has already been underway in Asia for over half a century. In the Caucasus and Pamir mountain ranges of Russia, scientists have found proof of a Bigfoot creature, which they call the Almista. In the nearby Himalayas, the highest mountains in the world, Western explorers and investigators have pursued the riddle of another elusive man-ape, the hairy giant known as the Abominable Snowman, or the Yeti. Part of the mountain people's lives for centuries, the snowman only became known to the West in the late 19th century, when British mountaineers began to attempt to conquer Mount Everest. But it wasn't until 1951, when veteran climber Eric Shipton discovered a new pass at 19,000 feet, that actual evidence was collected. Shipton, standing where no man had ever been before, took these photographs of giant man-like tracks. Once a non-believer in the Yeti, Shipton remembers.
Well, I must say I felt I had a very strange feeling inside. I've often seen these tracks before, but hitherto I'd always been a bit of an agnostic about the whole question, but seeing these tracks so absolutely fresh and clear, well, there seemed to be no doubt about it at all, and it was that really gave me a very eerie feeling that here one was in the presence of something quite unknown.
Although these strange footprints puzzled the scientific community, they reinforced the startling story told by a veteran explorer. Another discovered what was believed to be a Yeti's mummified hand, and what was said to be the hide of a Yeti's skull. Some anthropologists believe that the Abominable Snowman is a very primitive species of man. Others think it's a giant anthropoid, an undiscovered ape that has evolved in a direction other than man. They believe that these giant creatures migrated from Asia to America thousands of years ago on what was once the Bering Straits land bridge, which linked Russia to Alaska. In support of this theory, there is the evidence of Bigfoot's continuous presence in Indian history, appearing in various forms on totem poles and paintings, and being called by different names, like Gilwick, Silatic, Oma, Bukwas, and Sasquatch. Part of the North American Indians' mythology from the beginning, Bigfoot was first encountered by a European in 1811. British explorer and mountain man David Thompson noted in his journal that while crossing the Rockies, he came across footprints made by a giant. Footprints whose great size, he wrote, could not have been made by bears. And in July of 1884, a British Columbia newspaper carried the account of the capture of a creature. A creature they called Jacko, whose description fits that of a young Bigfoot. Another early account of Bigfoot in America comes from President Theodore Roosevelt in a book he wrote about his days out west. The true story concerns two trappers on the Salmon River. It was in 1852. The trappers encountered the creature. Violence followed. One of the men was killed. Roosevelt wrote that he believed the story. In 1924, in British Columbia, a vacationing prospector, Albert Ostman, reported that he was captured and held prisoner by a family of 4 Bigfoot creatures. Ostman's incredible tale included observations that one scientist felt could only have come from a direct encounter with a large primate species. Ostman signed an affidavit before his death, attesting to the truthfulness of his story. That same year in Washington State, Fred Beck and 4 other miners reported they shot at 2 different Bigfoot creatures. Later, Beck and his friends were attacked by an angry group of Bigfoot giants who tried to destroy their cabin by rolling large boulders onto the roof. These and other accounts make up the long history of man's experience with Bigfoot in the forests of America. Stories from the past, colorful and exciting, Yet by themselves, not quite enough to prove that Bigfoot exists. We need something more. The accounts of eyewitnesses today, people whose stories we can check on firsthand.
A lot of people make fun of me, but I don't care. I know it's there.
Tim Peeler swears he had an encounter with one of the most legendary beasts in history, Bigfoot.
Well, he was what I would call a Sasquatch.
Peeler says there's no film of his recent sighting because he was too nervous to go for his camera, but he says Bigfoot walked right by him.
He had gray hair and a gray beard that come down to here. But he had long hair that was yellowish gray.
He says he spotted the creature one night when he was startled by his dog's barking, and he peered out the window, and there it was.
I talked rough to him and run him off. And he come right by me. He wasn't 10 foot from me. He went back out that path.
Peeler vows to get proof next time.
Seeing is believing. So I'll try to get him on film.
A St. Louis University biology professor says there have been more than 2,500 Bigfoot sightings in the past 100 years in every state and parts of Canada. Myra Lopez, The Associated Press.
Is it myth, or does Bigfoot really exist? A Spokane woman claims that she captured the hairy beast on camera at Downriver Park a few days ago. And now she's posted it on YouTube for you to decide. KXLY4's Annie Bishop is live with a look at that video.
Well, and the woman captured this video on her iPhone. She didn't want to talk to us tonight about the video, so tonight we went on our own mission to track him down.
Look closely in the right-hand corner of your screen. There he is, a hunched-over mysterious creature creeping through the woods near the Spokane River. Could it be true? Bigfoot in Spokane?
Very easily articulate that. What the crap? Did you see that?
Yes. It's a classic road crossing sighting at night. And it's the first time that's ever been gotten by a law enforcement's dash cam.
It is the most dramatic footage ever taken of any of the world's mythical or legendary monsters. It was taken on amateur home video in 1966, and to this day has stood out as the clearest evidence of the existence of Sasquatch, the giant Bigfoot of America's far northwest. While the stories of the abominable snowman and Loch Ness monster perpetuate in the imagination, the image of the half-man, half-beast Bigfoot was captured on videotape in clear daylight. The film has become almost as legendary as the monster itself. Believers and skeptics have argued the film's authenticity for 3 decades. Now, the argument is about to heat up because of this. New amateur video shot in the same wooded region by Paul Freeman, a man who's tracked Bigfoot for 10 years.
It's probably 2 or 3 days old. They've been rained on.
It was taken after a recent spate of reported sightings by the local Nez Perce Indians. The Indians have believed in the creature's existence for centuries. Its legend is kept alive in stories passed down through generations. Freeman says he saw not only one Bigfoot that afternoon, but 2, and they scared the daylights out of him.
Oh, God.
I was like a little 5-year-old. I was crying, and I asked the man upstairs, you know, I said, hey, if you let me get out of here alive, I'll never bother these critters again, and I'm not going to.
The creature appeared suddenly as Freeman was walking along a bush track toward a watering hole where he'd spotted footprints.
Yeah, it looks like they've been here. I just walked around to where the spring runs into the pond, and there were tracks in the mud, and still muddy. It hadn't even settled yet, so I said, gee, me Christmas, you know, one's already been here. It just must have run out of here.
Suddenly, there it was.
I hear the brush popping and stuff.
Oh, there he goes.
Well, the big one I first filmed looked like it was about 7.5, 8 feet tall and weighed 700 pounds. And then I lost it in the bush, and I was looking with my camera, and I seen this little one that's coming right at me.
Oh, God. There's two of them, I guess.
The startling video is being studied by scientists at Oregon and Northern California universities, but to some...
There are many thousands of reports of people who claim to have seen the Sasquatches. Most of these are very consistent, and I'm inclined to believe that people are seeing a perfectly real wild animal. Sasquatch appears to be a bipedal animal walking on two legs in a human manner, but with the body usually tilted a little forward at the hips. The body size ranges from about 6 to perhaps 9 feet in height. Body weight of an adult is anywhere from 500 to 800 pounds or a little bit more. The Sasquatch is always described as being covered with hair, perhaps 2 to 4 inches long. Color is usually very dark brown or black, and very rarely reddish or other lighter colors have been reported. The appearance of the arms hanging down to the knees is not because the arms are any longer down, but the way it walks, raising its knees very high. There are a few interesting things about the Sasquatch face. It's more human than ape in the sense that the mouth does not protrude like a gorilla. The nose is relatively flat and wide. The brow ridges are very prominent, and above that the forehead is very retreating, and that's an ape-like characteristic. What's also interesting is that if I stand or hold myself in a normal posture, my mouth and chin are above the level of my shoulders. That's a standard human. Apes, however, have the shoulders up like this, and the mouth is below the level of the shoulders. The same is true of the Sasquatch. So if a Sasquatch wants to turn his head, he can only go so far before he runs into his shoulders. And like the apes, they either tip their head back to look, or they twist the entire body to look. A lot of the eyewitness reports often include a description of an extremely foul odor that's associated with them. And on rare instances, there is a description of an extremely loud, screaming, howling sound that they make.
Part of the problem we've had in proving that this creature is real is that scientists are confronted with a description of a creature which does not line up with any of the known North American game animals or big game animals. What it does line up with is great apes or humans, or even worse, something in between, and scientists as a rule have been very unwilling to entertain this possibility.
The Gigantopithecus was apparently an upright bipedal animal, being twice the body mass of a gorilla or more, 800 pounds for a male. It lived at the same time as early humans, so it wasn't in the human line, so it probably had the ape-sized brain, would have been covered with hair like any other wild primate, and we have a perfect description of a Sasquatch.
We recorded some vocalizations which are extremely unusual. They've been studied at the University of Wyoming by Dr. Lynn Curlin. He was a professor of electrical engineering. They did a comparative analysis between human speech and the speech of other primates and of the sounds that we captured. Their conclusions are clearly in the favor of the recording's authenticity, and that the sounds truly may represent something we don't know anything about, of the likes of Bigfoot or Sasquatch.
Many people have expressed opinions on the film that Roger Patterson made in 1967 of a Sasquatch in Northern California. Unfortunately, most of these people don't know anything about human biomechanics. One outstanding exception is Dmitry Donskoy in Russia, who studied the film, and I've also talked to him about it. And he's quite adamant that it is an extremely large animal, moves in a ponderous manner that is totally inconsistent with any human locomotion. Another expert was Donald Grieve in London, whose opinion was that if it was filmed at 16 or 18 frames a second, it moved in a non-human manner, but at 24 frames a second, it moved like a small man moving very rapidly. When Patterson finished his filming, he assured anyone who would listen to him that he noted that the setting was for 18 frames a second. Well, I assumed that was correct, and I did some studies comparing the pendulum swing of arms of different lengths, and concluded that if it was filmed at 24 frames a second, the creature could be a little more than 4 feet tall. At 18 frames a second, it was about 6 feet tall. At 16 frames, it would be over 7 feet tall. Well, further investigation showed that the camera that Roger was using actually does not have an 18-frame setting. It goes from 16 to 24. A gentleman with BBC got a camera of the same type and electronically timed how many frames per second it worked at. And he set it at 16, and he found it was doing 19 frames a second. Now, I concluded at 18 frames, I got a walking stature of 6 feet tall.
Plaster casts of these footprints are often made. Many of these casts end up in the office of Jeff Meldrum, a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at Idaho State University.
I first became actively involved in the investigation into the existence of Bigfoot some 4 or 5 years ago, when I had the opportunity to examine firsthand a line of fresh footprints near the Umatilla Forest outside of Walla Walla, Washington. Well, the footprints were about 14 inches long, about 5 inches across. There was quite a number of footprints in this trackway, about 35 to 40 prints in all. And the positions of the toes and other dynamic signatures of the foot were very consistent with the walking speed and with the contours of the ground. And they contrasted with other tracks in that same line of footprints, showing a lot of spontaneity and variation from step to step. This level of detail would be rather difficult to fabricate without an in-depth knowledge of not only the functional anatomy of the human foot, but that of non-human primate feet as well. Perhaps one of the most significant details evident in these footprints was the presence of unusual flexibility at the mid-tarsal joint. This is very uncharacteristic of a human footprint. In the human foot, the stiff arch causes the foot to flex here at the ball in such a fashion. In non-human primates, apes in particular, the midfoot is much more flexible. The arch is flat, and flexibility occurs at the mid-tarsal joint. This is the kind of movement that's indicated in the footprints associated with Bigfoot. Based on the numerous footprints that I've examined over the past several years, it's evident that the Sasquatch foot is characterized by being flat and very flexible in contrast to the human foot. This is actually an adaptation that's well suited to the habitat in which it occupies here in the rugged mountains of the Pacific Northwest. In collecting these footprint casts, a number of compelling discoveries have been made. For example, the tracks of the same animal have been found at different locations. What's more, these tracks were documented by different people who were completely unaware of each other's activities, and the time between their findings was up to 7 years. In some instances, footprints display deformity, as evidenced by these bulges known as bunionettes. From the many footprints that I've examined to date emerges a model of foot anatomy that is both consistent and yet quite distinct from that of the human foot. One has to ask, who has the little black book that teaches everyone to fake these footprints so consistently?
Jeff Meldrum's footprint evidence has attracted a lot of attention from newspaper reporters, television producers, and most significantly from a Texas fingerprint expert named Jimmy Chilcutt. Highly regarded by agents of the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and state and local law enforcement, Chilcutt is one of the few fingerprint experts who's developed an expertise in non-human primate prints. In other words, he is amongst a handful of people worldwide who can tell the difference between a print left by a human and one left by a primate.
Armed with this special knowledge, Chilcutt contacted Jeff Meldrum and asked for permission to examine the footprint casts. His information led him to a surprising conclusion.
I contacted Dr. Meldrum up at Idaho State University and explained my expertise as a primate fingerprint expert. Asked if I could examine the castings that he had, and when I did examine those castings, I found something that surprised even me. On this cast in 1967 in Northern California, the ridges flow lengthwise down the side of the foot. Human ridges flow across the foot. There's no way that this cast could be that of a human being. I also examined another cast that was cast 15 years later and hundreds of miles away. This cast displayed the same ridge texture and pattern flow as the Northern California cast. The evidence from these casts indicates that these prints were left by an unknown primate, one that we have not fully documented or that we fully understand.
The vast majority of the scientific community would not be convinced of the existence of the Sasquatch until a specimen is actually produced. This could be just a skeleton or a fair number of bones, but these are not as easy to come by as a lot of people seem to think. Most animals die in one of two methods. Either they pick their place of death or they don't. Those that are killed have no choice in the matter, and we do run into their skeletons in the wild on many occasions. Those who can pick their place of death, where they think they're just ailing and they're trying to recover, they go for low places, hidden under vegetation, and when they die, they're stripped clean by other carnivores, and their bones eventually sink into the ground or get washed down into rivers, and we almost never find them. Now, I've only talked to one person who says he's found a bear that died a natural death. Well, there's at least 100 bears out there for every one Sasquatch. Bears only live half as long, so there should be 200 bear skeletons for every one Sasquatch skeleton. So it's not at all surprising that we have not found the remains of Sasquatches. It would be surprising if we did find some Sasquatch bones.
Grover Krantz was correct in assuming that it would be almost impossible to find the skeleton of a Bigfoot. But here in these photos, located and taken in Texas, it could be a grave of what we would call a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. The grave and the bones that were in it were approximately 109 inches from head to toe. This would be a quite large person. The anatomy and the skeleton appeared to be human in almost every detail, from the skull and jawbone down to the hands, feet, femurs, thigh bone, and the rest of the skeleton. On further analysis, it would not be a pure human skeleton. It showed other signs. The jawbone was not quite consistent with the human jawbone, and the teeth had a lateral slant, as if it was grinding the wrong way. When the DNA was done, the graph at the top of the sample was from the find of one of the bottom is the base of the human genome, or the human genome file. Notice the blue line. If you note the abnormality in the top slide of the blue line versus the bottom slide of the blue line, it is totally different. What we're looking at is a non-human species. It could be, in all practical purposes, if not a hybrid, Bigfoot himself. The DNA virtually proves that Bigfoot exists, and so does the skeleton.